Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. RFK Refugees Podcast Emergency Edition.
Red alert.
RFK Refugees Podcast. Ted here, John here. We are here to essentially break down the news that just dropped. We just got the news about the roster decision day, which is a big day. If you're unfamiliar with MLS rules, let's educate you. Every single MLS contract has an option. And basically it's up to the teams as to whether they exercise those options. MLS loves these options. It essentially gives them more control. If I'm the MLSPA, maybe I'm looking at the next collective bargaining agreement, a way to get rid of those. I think there was a great post. I forget the player, but he was kind of talking about how like this is really like feast and famine for a lot of players, like players who have these option years, either they feast and they get a little bit of a pay bump because the team likes them, or they're left out and have to find a new team.
I think it was Tesho Akindele said that somewhere this last couple days.
Yep. So Tesho Akindele talking about what happens with a lot of these option years. Well, DC United made their decision, so we aren't here to debate the validity of these rules. They exist for right now. DC United made those roster decisions. If you haven't seen the headlines and news, there are 3 players they have exercised contract options on. 2 are probably maybe not surprising. 1 certainly not surprising.
2 of them I picked this morning as going to be the only one, so I was almost right.
We were almost right. It was Russell Canouse, Ted Kutupietro, and Ruan probably being the only sort of somewhat surprise from that perspective. Well, I'll get into a minute maybe about what the thinking is here. Players they have declined the contract option on. Nabil Assad, not surprising. Eric Davis, maybe he looked okay, but he's also 31, so maybe the team thinks there's better options out there. Jose Ferreiro, apparently Ali Mackay was not impressed with his CONCACAF Gold Cup. Jacob Green, probably the biggest surprise on the list, I would say, of players whose options have been declined. Now, options have been declined, does not mean they cannot re-sign them. They're probably, I would say I would not be surprised if Green ends up back on the roster, maybe at Loudoun, but it is an indication that, they didn't feel like his option contract was worth it. So
don't believe it until you see the Instagram goodbye post. That's the sign they're not coming back, which to date, we'll get through the list and then I'll tell you the ones that already exist.
Brendan Heinzike, Eric Hurtado, Andy Nahar, Nigel Robertha, and Samake are the other players who were not exercise options. Donovan Pines and Derek Williams are out of contract. So I think Donovan Pines had his option exercise. Derek Williams was probably in an option year when they picked him up. So they are out of contract and are MLS free agents. As John mentioned, talk about the goodbye post. You already have 2 sort of for sure goodbye posts. Both are Brendan Heinzike and Andy Nahar. Andy Nahar, probably the one that hits the closest. I mean, there might be some others. Sorry.
Derek Williams posted also a month ago that he was gone. So,
but we kind of already knew that one. So
we did. I was just saying those are the goodbyes. So let's just quickly run through people who are guaranteed to be with DC United next year. Mm-hmm. And again, of that list there, and we'll talk about it. There might be some that we see again, but guaranteed for 2024: Matai Akambone, Christian Benteke, Steven Birnbaum, Alex Bono, Christian Dahome, Chris Durkin, Christian Fletcher, Jeremy Garay. Interesting. Jackson Hopkins, Mahana Giadzi, Mateus Click, Tyler Miller, Martin Rodriguez, Pedro Santos, Hayden Sargis, and Luis Zamudio. So if you'll notice on there's lots of interesting things. Defenders. Here are the defenders on the roster. Matai Akambone, Steve Birnbaum, and Hayden Sargis. Those are your center backs. Mahana Giadzi, that's going to be your guaranteed starting left back. Ruan, likely you're starting right back, pending some moves. And Pedro Santos, he of the 37-year-old hamstrings, I believe, backing up, hopefully, rarely, Mahana Giadzi in defense. So that's a young half and half. It's a very young and very old defensive backline. But you mentioned Ruan being sort of a surprise. Andy Nahar leaving, you have to leave yourself some people. That could potentially play fullback. There are obviously going to be. There's 19 players so far on the roster. There's going to be major turnover. What do you think about that defensive situation currently? I think Akambone as a starter is actually good.
Yeah, I mean, I think this potentially. I think center back. Obviously, you basically have Akambone and Steve Birnbaum and Hayden Sargis. If you think Hayden Sargis is ready, otherwise there's going to need to be some resources in there. They do not have a lot of international slots, especially with some of the other announcements today. I think there are some contracts. I think if there was an option year or they were not already under contract, I don't think you would see them back. Pedro Santos being one of them. and maybe even Mohana Jazzy. I don't know. We don't know the real like details of like how
John
the
Howe
teams.
loves Mohana Jazzy and said he's like the best left back in MLS when healthy. So clearly, I don't know if he's even still employed with DC United. He may not be. He may not be that much longer. We don't know anything with Alan McKay's sort of. And we'll talk a little bit. This is not a full episode, but
yeah, the one positive I think regarding Sean Howe's potential employment, because we love Sean Howe. He's a friend of the show. He's been on more than once, and once you're on more than once, you're a friend of the show.
Yep, Green Giant
is the belief in data and analytics, and that Sean Howe we know has been somebody who also abides by that. So, but again, it's becoming more ubiquitous amongst.
That's less of something to hang your hat on now. It's like dude.
It's pretty much a defined thing. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with the front office staff. This probably will not be the last time we'll see a shakeup. We still don't even have a coach yet. But I think there's lots of room here. Akabone, I think right now he looks like maybe he's your penciled in starter here. He is still incredibly young. I think the team is going to probably obviously look for some depth there, whether that's through MLS, whether that's internationally. We'll see. Their international slots are pretty full at this point. So did you want to go next to the midfield or?
Yep, let's do midfield.
Yep.
So Russell Canals gets his contract exercised. Who had an Ironman season for him for his past at DC United. Chris Durkin still in the under 22 initiative, I believe. Somewhat grandfathered under 22. Mm-hmm. Jeremy Garay is interesting. Jackson Hopkins and Mateus Click. Jeremy Garay struggled last year in Loudoun. We could bring I don't imagine we're going to have a whole special episode for Jeremy Garay, but if you talk to our next in line folks, Jeremy Garay could not hold down a starting spot in that midfield when healthy. So it is interesting that this club would keep him and then get rid of, at least so far, Jake Begrain, who played a lot more for the first team and also is in a position of need from a depth perspective. But no other real surprises there in the midfield. What do you have any thoughts particularly about that group?
No real surprises here. I think this is definitely going to be a big year, obviously, for Jackson Hopkins and where he slots in. I think the biggest thing for him is going to be what position does he fit? Is he a winger? Is he more of a box-to-box sort of midfielder? Where is his starting role? So
he's played both internationally, right? He sort of depending on what the need was. He was playing box-to-box, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I got to tell you, looking at this roster, there is one coach I have in mind considering the amount of young players are on this field, and that is Oscar Pareja. As if I am Ali McKay and I look at this and we'll get to a minute about a player who's not on this list who I think we can go ahead and talk about. According to Tom Bogart, not official yet, Gabriel Pirani will be back. They're going to extend the loan through next summer. So he gets sort of another run out under a new coach, still under the U22 initiative player. So it seems like they maybe saw enough that they said, okay, we think there's something here. We're going to, it was a weird time he was in the middle. We were already looking at a new coach. Let's get him a fresh off season, with the team, with the club. Let's give him, a fresh set of eyes. We think there's some potential there. So he's another player in that sort of mix who we assume will be the starter and probably have the number 10 role unless the team goes out and gets a number 10.
Yeah, the thing that's always interesting about Pirani is all of the data that came out at the end of the season. Was that Matt Doyle was looking at that saying like he was one of the least creative midfielders playing for the amount of minutes he played in that position. So new team, new opportunity. But I think I love the fact that the team says we're not going to be pushed into a decision here on a player that did not show to be the guy who's going to lead the team, and we're going to give him the keys no matter how young he is. So I guarantee that what happened likely is he had a strong season the Pan American Games, or strong tournament for the Pan American Games. And I guarantee that when they went back to Santos and said, we're not ready yet, Santos said, okay, but the option to buy now is now $2 million more. It's more expensive. To get this extended look, it's going to cost you. And if he's great, it's going to cost you that little bit more. I don't care. That's great. I think that is a prudent move. I was nervous the entire offseason about how, people were very sick. Just sign him. Like, maybe he'll be fine. And you don't want to make a commitment to a player that scale and in a position that important to the success of the team unless you got to date first here. You can't just jump in bed with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, and I would look at his numbers and I would say, we talk about data and we're a show that, I believe fervently in using analytics and, it can tell you things. There are people out there that still say, it's all junk or it doesn't add up. But I think, you have to recognize with data, sometimes it's not going to tell you the whole story. He arrived in a very, very weird situation of a team trying to scrap its way to the playoffs doesn't really get an off season to really learn the players, system, everything like that. I think keeping Ruan here maybe part of that, extending that option. He's a Brazilian. He speaks fluent Portuguese to kind of keep him, keep Ronnie, maybe give him the best, the most opportunities under a new coach, under a new system. He might flourish. He might look like really good. I think certainly there was enough there to say, I think he deserves another look. Data is not necessarily backing it up, but data can switch once guys get comfortable, and once guys get better. So he'll be certainly one to watch this year, especially now it's confirmed he's coming back. Forward line, let's go to that. Unless you got anything else you wanted to drop.
Nope.
Christian Benteke, Christian Dahome, Christian Fletcher, Teku DiPietro, and Martin Rodriguez.
Three Christians.
Three Christians.
Three Christians and a Ruan.
Yes, three Christians, all spelling their name differently, all different spelling Christians. Dahome, I think, obviously is he's under contract. We can't really do. I will be curious to watch what happens with him. Is there a scenario in which you can tell him, "Hey, go find another club"? You're not going to get many minutes. We've already have Teku DiPietro. He's a starter over you. Christian Fletcher has been lighting it up at the U21s. He's going to get an extended look. Obviously Martin Rodriguez coming back. I wonder if both of them maybe. I think those are going to be two players to watch. I could see them saying, let's get another season with Martin Rodriguez. He doesn't have a lot of value. Dahome, I bet you could go to South America, to a club in South America who'd be willing to take him with his sort of skill set. So that'll be certainly something to watch with what happens with them. I'm sure if it was up to Ali McKay, maybe Martin Rodriguez is here, but I think both players, if they were in their option years, would be on that no option list. Mm-hmm. But they're under contract, so they have to stay on here. So certainly one to watch. Obviously,
Ali McKay will be looking forward to next year with less of that sort of pre-decided situation in front of him. I think the only players sort of signed to long-term deals are Birnbaum. We looked at this before. Birnbaum, Jayazi, and
probably. I mean, obviously,
Cook and Benteke. Fletcher. All the guys. Fletcher, Hopkins, and now Ted DiPietro. I wonder if that was a 1-year option or a multi-year option.
2-year option.
2-year. Okay.
I think I'm a little surprised that they didn't. I think and maybe this is not what Ted DiPietro wants, but I'm still a little. Maybe they're exercising that option. But if I'm Ali McKay, I am already calling his agent, and I'm like, what do we have to do to get a more long-term deal in place here? Like, we'll add a couple years, we'll give him a nice pay bump. Like, what do we have to do here to give him some extra years? Because then you're riding that 1-year contract, and then he's out of contract, and so I don't know.
We have a national situation. We have a national situation where you do not early extend any of your players, and then they all end up walking when they're free agents. And DC United has had a real long-term habit of losing players for nothing. Yeah. So I don't know. We're still very early on that. I don't think he's necessarily ready to jump anywhere. Anyway, he's only played for one season, really. But as far as
I think if you're DC, I think you're going to wait till after the Olympics, see if he makes that roster. His reviews at the Pan American Games were very positive from what I recall. He's sort of maybe outside looking in on that Olympic team. If he gets off to a hot start, if he's performing really well, I find it very hard to believe he would be left off that roster come Olympic time. If he does well this year, performs well in the Olympics, I would say there's a pretty good chance that a team from Europe is going to come sniffing along and say, like, we maybe want to grab this guy. And DC would be in a position to sell because they would just have one more year left on that contract. So, and maybe that's the benefit of, like, they're extending the option. But if they get to the summer and maybe he has a good MLS campaign, but maybe he doesn't make the Olympic team, there isn't really a whole lot of interest, then maybe he sits down and says, yeah, let's get a long-term deal in place. So one to watch for sure.
One of the Adams from Next in Line Pod had a very interesting observation about Teku DiPietro, and I want to make sure I find it here really quickly, that due to his sort of family situation, he is eligible for 5 different national teams. Wow. The U.S., Germany, China, Poland, and is that Italy or Mexico? Italy. So I'm hoping for Poland personally. I think that the U.S. might be a hard buy, but Poland, that'd be cool. Yeah. As my ancestral homeland, or one of them. So yeah. But anyway, so this was a day of mild shock. I think. Oh, you mean a lot of these things were possible. We talked about this right when the season ended, that they could go 2 ways here. One way would be to gut this thing to the studs, and it most likely would lead to, barring a Houston Dynamo miracle season of here's half a new roster, and somehow, yes, we're also in the conference finals. More likely, you're going to have a transition year where you're struggling to sort of put things together and struggling to make like a really deep run anywhere. And it's better to be okay with that than to keep trying on these 1 year fixes to bring in these old guys to just get us into the playoffs and see what happens. This appears to be not the plan, and I'm thankful for that. I think Brendan Hines-Like is a player that's indicative of. Like he was fine. He was on good money. Derek Williams was on really good money, but they're both proven MLS caliber starters, and you could have kept them, and you would have known kind of what to expect. But not the plan. I like it. I think it shows a lot of confidence in man himself, for Allie McKay, to be a player evaluator and attract new talent. And I think we're going to see it's going to be an exciting offseason because of that, because of so many spots that have to be filled. Look for some of those names to come back. So right now it's at 19 players. Do not expect we're going to get into the real. We're not going to sign 11 new players. That would be unlikely to me. I don't think that will happen. Some of those players will come back. Let's talk about really quickly who you think might come back. Emil Assad, come back or no come back?
No.
Eric Davis, maybe. No? Okay, I'm saying maybe.
I'm a no on that one. I think, yeah, I'm a no on that one.
Jose Fajardo.
No.
I'm a no. Jacob Green.
I think he'll be back.
I think he wants playing time, and I think he's not going to be back because they probably told him, can't guarantee that. Brendan Hines-Like, obviously not back. Eric Hurtado, not back. Andy Nahar, not back. Nadra Bertha, not back. Kasua Sumake, not back.
Yeah.
Donovan Pines. This has been like a conversation point here, I think, for a lot of folks. Before we move on quickly on Donovan Pines, the quote there from yesterday, Allie McKay was asked, does Donovan Pines going to come back? He said, I don't have the quote directly in front of me, but basically was like, we'll have some conversations, and if there's interest on both sides, maybe something might work out.
It really felt like to me that they had sort of made their initial offer, and
Take it or leave it.
and Pines was like, and Pines' group was like, well, we're going to go explore and we'll get back to you. So I think they are not at any sort of active pursuant. They're not actively pursuing him, is the way I took that. They're not being like, well, we need to get a deal done. Like, do you need more money? Blah, blah, blah. We really want you back. It's sort of like here's our offer. We think it's fair. Maybe we can discuss a little bit if you're actually interested in coming back. And I think
and that's good. I think that's a fair deal. I think he's a talented but flawed player.
Yeah.
So I think he's not a player you break the bank on.
I think if there is a deal outside in the internet in Europe, I think he takes that. I think if he is stuck kind of in MLS, I think there's more of a chance he might be back. I think that's going to be the real. I think Europe is kind of the decider here. That's really going to determine what happens with him. Derek Williams not back. Obviously back. I do want to talk obviously a little bit. I think the most sentimental name on the people who are not coming back is certainly Andy Nahar, a guy, and I think it's sort of the team put out a really nice goodbye video to him, sort of highlighting his rise as a player. There were a lot of moments, early on in this time. I mean, there were some bad times, and Andy Nahar really was a bright spot. I think there's no question that a guy like Bill Hamid. I would still put Steve Birnbaum in that category. I think everybody has a lot of recency bias and just general upsetness with the team in general. I think, Steve Birnbaum has been an excellent servant to this club. And I think he is one of those players that I think once the dust settles, once everything's, done and he's, finally says goodbye, I think there will be hopefully, in my opinion, I hope there will be I can't think of the word right now, but basically people are going to start to realize that he actually was a really good player for this club. I think Andy Nahar for me is interesting because, he was here for a short time, 2010 to last year was 2012. So it was 2 years here. And then he's really only been back for like 2 to 3 years. So really short time. So interesting that the impact he will have. And, we talk about, we're sort of, I think, finally coming up. We haven't for a while had, I think, really many players that were kind of Hall of Tradition worthy. We have obviously Bill Hamid. He will definitely he should be the next one on that list. I think the team needs to induct him as soon as they can, get him on that list. Maybe once he announces his retirement, he should be on that wall. I think Andy should be there as well. Simply for, I think what he meant is sort of the team is sort of the academy, the homegrown, the one of our own type of thing. I think he might be the player with like the shortest like actual tenure of games at DC who maybe made the biggest impact. So very sad to see him go. I hope he land wherever he lands, he is, successful. But I think this is one where you kind of have to take your heart and use your brain a little bit. Regardless of his contract, I think you have to look at how many games is he really going to be available. And, I think, yes, we will struggle maybe to find his skill set. I would also argue that if he were like a number 10, if he were like a creative attacker, and his spot was on the wing and being sort of that high pressing winger, maybe you make an exception and allow him on the team. But I think you almost have to look like he's coming from that right back spot. And I also think you would be putting him in the ring spot would maybe be taking away time from a Teku DiPietro, from a Christian Fletcher, from guys that will be, future big attackers for this club, and certainly have value there. So I think the move from a brain perspective makes sense. It's sad to see. There will be a lot of upset people. I'm currently wearing his kit right now, so but wish you the best. Wish you the best, Andy.
Agreed.
Yep. You agree? You were very much on the Andy train, as far as like keeping him.
No,
changed?
No, I said you can get rid of him if you get rid of everybody. You can't get rid of him if it's only him.
That's true.
He's not the problem, and he's showing that he's not because you're getting rid of everyone. So that was my point.
But thoughts? I mean, sort of your thoughts. I want your thoughts because you mean we got rid of essentially we got rid of Andy, who's the right. We essentially made a choice between Andy Nahar and Ruan at sort of that right wing back position.
Ruan, I think availability is the most important ability right now, so that's why. I think you can't. It's a player that is talented but not available as a luxury for a team that is in a different position or is in the position we're in. So I think it makes sense. I think he also wants to cash in. He's 30. He's going to potentially get money from somebody, and I bet he came back to us and said, "We have an option for you at X dollars." He says, "I want X plus Y dollars and more years." And Ali said, "No, thank you," and that was that. And I think that's fair for all parties. And I'm sad that Andy's gone, but I think it's the right move.
Yeah. Let's, I want to briefly mention Christian Fletcher as well. I think a guy who is lighting it up in the U21. I know we've talked about this a lot. He just had a hat trick today.
And he had one earlier this week too. That's 6 goals in 2 games in 4 days.
Now, again, this is U21s. Based on some of the score lines I've seen for these games, it does not sound there's a lot of defensive ability, but again, I think it gives him confidence. I think this is a guy now. I think if you're Ali, you need to find a coach who believes in him and wants to get him on the field. Same with a lot of these other young guys like Akambone, Teku DiPietro. You need to grow Chris Durkin a little bit as well. I think he's a player you want to see more out of, particularly next year. And then also you're bringing in Gabriel Pirani. So I think right now we're looking at this team. You called it a mix of young and old. The old is the guys on the last year of their contract or entering their option years. The young are the guys who have either just had those options exercised in Teku DiPietro or guys you're looking at for the next few years. So you're really looking at, again, we'll see what moves this team makes as far as DPs. Again, we're talking about a second DP. But you have to think that this is, if you had to pick a breakout star from that young group, Teku DiPietro was it last year. Christian Fletcher has to be it, I think, this year. I don't think there's any question about that. So,
nope.
And this is why, I mean, if you're a coach, I think also this move, I think this, if I am a coach entering this year and I'm looking at jobs and I'm looking at offers, I look at DC and I say, man, there's a lot I can work with here. Like there's a lot of ways we can sort of build this thing. Yes, we've got, Mateus Click. Yes, we've got Christian Benteke, but both those players were solid to very good. So those are guys who, in my opinion, have been the closest they've played like that. They played like designated players. Mateus Click wasn't lighting up the league, but I think he was worth the contract that we paid him. Christian Benteke had probably his best season, obviously at DC, his best season in a while. So, those are guys you're not walking in with like a bunch of DP busts that are on there for the rest of the year. There's a lot you can potentially build this team into and sort of be on that project for the next few years. I think it also shows, to me, it also, with regards to Ali, it shows that the ownership maybe has a lot of confidence and are willing to give him the time, because if their thing is like, well, you need to make the playoffs this year, that is bar none, you have to do that. So you got to figure it out. Either he is being really risky and being like, I'm going for broke here. Either I'm going to make the playoffs or I'm not. But this is, I'm going to do this my way. Or the team has said, look, do what you need to do, get it right. We're looking at, a 3-4 year window path here. So, just do whatever you do to need to get it done. I hope that shows confidence in them, that they're finally saying, we need to build something here. We can't just be trying to make the playoffs. Like, we actually have to build an identity that the fans want. So I
think that's right. Based on everything, we're going to end after this. We didn't get a chance to get into all of the interview. Apparently, Allie McKay and Jason Levy and talked to every other DC United adjacent outlet in town this last week. We hope to get to sit with some of them here in the near future, but there was a lot of conversation about sort of what that looks like and what was being sought after when they signed Allie and what Dave Casper's role is. So we're not going to get into that now, but yeah, read all that stuff. This is a time of transition for DC United. I think a time of hope for fans, and also I would caution patience. Although I think we all have it because we're so beaten down by this team over the last decade that we're not expecting a lot next year. But I would say temper your expectations even more, and we'll see what we get.
Yeah. And I will say, I don't think this negates this team from, I don't think the moves here necessarily negate this team from being successful. I think, teams have, you talked about Houston, plenty of teams have blown it up and had limited expectations, but came out of it looking a lot better than they did before they had supposedly better talent. So I think the next thing to do is this team has to nail, Allie has to nail the coaching hire. And there's a lot of coaches out there they could go with, a lot of different directions they could go with as far as their coach. I'll be very curious to see who they're going with. I find it very interesting. I'm really hoping that Orlando does the absolute dumbest thing and says goodbye to Oscar Pereira, because I want him here. And I think this is a guy that I think you would want maybe leading these young guys. And I think he's shown he can develop young talent. So if we hire Oscar Pereira, my expectations will go over the moon. I'll just say that much.
Great.
All right, folks. I think that's going to do it. A quick little 30-minute pod drop talking about the roster. We will be back in 2 weeks on Monday.
And back next Friday for Patreons.
Next Friday for Patreons.
If you're listening to this today, Friday, December 1st, you're a Patreon. Thank you for being one. Mm-hmm. If you're listening to this on Monday, you could have listened to this on Friday. If you want to do that, go to patreon.com/RFKrefugees and become a $5 Patreon.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say we're going to put this out on Tuesday. We're going to give some of our Patreon listeners
Tuesday then. If you're listening to this on Tuesday,
we do our podcast on Tuesday morning. So yes. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. We will catch you guys in a couple weeks. Vamos.
Thank you for listening to RFK Refugees Podcast. Make sure you rate and review the show wherever you download podcasts. If you want to support the show, consider joining our Patreon or subscribing to our channel on Twitch. Lastly, make sure you're following us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, Twitch, Goals.tv, Friendster, MySpace, and Tumblr. Some of those are even real. Vamos.